Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool, and I've really been impressed with Olight over the years. In fact, long before I've had this YouTube channel, I worked with Olight and T&E and working on reviews of different products that they'd come out with. And it was fun to watch them innovate and then really disrupt the space. I mean, and become a leader that a lot of companies have to follow. And one area where I found it kind of interesting to watch was in their WMLs. And I've been working with their WMLs ever since they first started making such things. This is a battery-powered one. Pop it open, you got a couple of CR123 batteries inside it. Now that's always great. That was the way it worked. In fact, this is one of my favorites. This is a Surefire, and as you know, I do love Surefire lights, but they are kind of primitive given the innovation that Olight was pushing forward. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's obsolete. It just means that you were getting so much more, especially for your money. You were getting more lumens, you were getting longer run times, better interface. And I've had lots of Surefire failures. I went through, I've been through about half a dozen different tail caps. I've had circuit boards go out, LEDs flicker, and Surefire is great. They're on top of it. But it's fun to see innovation, to see what could be. And that's where this comes in. This is a new Olight here. This is the Olight PLX, or what they call dual beams, one mission, and it's all because of this switch right here. Now I've mounted this onto my stapler here because I'm often using a stapler with these, and Olight has tested this thing to over 10,000 staples, and it's been rock solid. It's got a triangular front end with a great big spotlight and then two area lights or floodlights, and that's critical because many times when we're choosing a WML, we have to decide which way do we go. Do we want a hot spot? Do we want distance? Do we want flood? And there's all kinds of philosophies on how the things are actually used and what's safe. Personally, I think they're imperative for many reasons. But anyway, I was really thrilled when Olight came out with this little guy. Now this does have a red laser, this little balder, because I was excited it had a charging port. But one of the things with this light is you notice this Olight charger does not stick to it. What's up there? Well, it takes a special charger because of the reverse polarization when they go with these really tiny lights. Anyway, what we have here now is a USB-C. So you can always leave home with a full charge. And why that's critical is because these little batteries, they're kind of expensive. And a lot of people who use them, yeah, they're on the taxpayer's dime, so they don't care. They swap them out constantly. But, if a little bit of the power's gone, let's say you run your light for 5 minutes, do you switch it before you head out again on another evening walk? Or do you hope it's like a flashlight and you'll just run it till it's dead and then swap the batteries? Well, the nature of these kinds of things pretty much now demand that you actually go out with a full charge every single time. So that's where this thing is great. Easy to use, with that USB-C, no cables necessary other than the standard one that you're probably charging everything else with. And it fits on a lot of different things. I've got this on a 1913 rail. That's what I've installed onto my stapler. It's what I have on most of my tools, but I have a few others where you can see they've got this little GL here, so I've got that installed. It does come with a 1913. You can see it's written on there. Right there, 1913, or the GL, and the GL is just a little bit thinner for its specific kind of mounting, and it's got this sort of unique thing here that slides back and forth. Now what does this mean? Well, if you put this, once this plate is on here, and by the way, it does come with a tool to change plates, and it's a T6, but I would recommend using a real T6. It just fits a lot better. Because it is a pretty snug screw. You want it to be, comes with an extra screw there too that does have Loctite on it. A lot of people ask me about these OEMs. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description. But anyway, once that's on there, what it allows you to do is to mount it on the rail and then basically this stays still, but you can slide the light back and forth to get it in the proper position. and then you clamp down here. Now you can use a screwdriver, that's what I often use, but it is a dished slot there, so it's also designed to run with, say, a coin, but like this penny here, but good luck finding a penny. So you can use a screwdriver, just snug that down. And what it does is it clamps these two pieces in, locking that into position so this can't slide back and forth. And then the operation of this is really simple. You've got these two tail switches here. If you push and hold one in, it's momentary. So that's great. On, off, and that's 1200 lumens just blasting out in either spot or flood. Now, if you click it, it stays on. If you double click it, it stays on. If you push both of them, strobe warning, or if you triple click it, you can get that strobe too. But this is really the magic. So look at this outside here. What you see is just how massive the spill is on the flood setting. And that is critical because you don't always want to point your stapler at something you don't want to staple. But then there might be a darker area or a recess or something like that where you're having trouble seeing inside and you just flip the switch and boom, you can now see quite a bit further. And that's not just in raw distance, but that's also around obstacles. What about up in trees? Wherever you need to look, you could just switch back and forth, almost like binoculars that you're holding up to your eye, backing them off your eye to look around, where maybe a scope might be a little bit better example. Lifting your eye up, looking down, lifting up. That's really where this is. And then look at the size of this guy. It is a tiny little thing. Lifetime warranty, reasonably priced, a little over $100. There's a sale on them right now. There's coupon codes and stuff in the description. Little bomb-proof tank. It says it's good for 1 meter drop. I assume it's more than that. The design looks outstanding, as far as a lot of the different lights that I've played around with. Especially like this plastic housing here, the Surefires, kind of a classic design. These are definitely designed for ease of taking on and off with that little, you just pull this. Most of that is because you had to keep pulling this thing off. This was up against the frame and you needed to swap batteries, so you had to take these things on and off constantly, almost every day if you were a professional. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring this out to your attention. Another innovation in a really cool space. I wouldn't get one as a pocket light though, because you can turn this thing on quite easily. That's kind of the point. And as far as putting it into holsters and things like that, there are a lot of different designs that are already out that accommodate this just fine. In fact, if you've been running one of the other lights, you might try it and see. A lot of times retention is actually part of what the light does inside the holster, but it's really something that is kind of a symbiotic relationship between manufacturers where you have to have enough of a market to make it worthwhile making something, but then you also have to have that something in order to attract the customers, and kind of a innovative space to for the marketers as well. But anyway, there it is. Beautiful light, well executed, outstanding design. The Olight PLX. And with that, Doc out.